Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk About That, where we talk about the things that I think we all need to just talk more about. I'm Lara Wellman. I'm a business coach, and in my work, I get to talk to people a lot. And there are so many topics that I have come up on a regular basis that are so much more than just about running a business that I wanted to start having conversations that still apply to business owners, but that apply to everybody. And there are so many little topics that I am excited to have these conversations about. Today, the conversation is about body image. And I think this is a particularly important one when it comes to how we feel about the weight of our bodies, fat phobia, internalized fat phobia, eating disorders. There's so many things that impact how we feel about our bodies. And so I wanted to have a conversation about that. So I have three wonderful guests who are joining me today. I'm going to introduce them to you, and then we're going to have a conversation. So Pamela George. Throughout her career, Pamela George has been steadfastly committed to one overarching goal: to educate and empower women so they may regain control of their finances and start living the life they want. As a woman who clawed her way out of poverty and was raised by an illiterate mother, she now teaches financial literacy, proving anything is truly possible. Welcome, Pamela. We have another Pam. Pamela Stewart is here. Pam is a modern abstract mixed media artist from Canada, Ontario. Her work has been shown in art exhibitions and galleries across Ontario and Quebec. And she also has a line of wearable art, which you can find at the Ottawa Artisan Store. She works part-time at Big Brothers Big Sisters of Ottawa, is a mom of 11-year-old twins, is a former indie filmmaker and magazine editor, and is a marathon distance open water swimmer. At the age of 50, she is also still playing competitive volleyball. Welcome, Pam.
Hello.
And last but not least, Kristina Laforge is a public servant, mom, baker, runner, and advocate for supporting people with eating disorders and for helping Ukrainian refugees. So welcome to everybody. I'm really excited to have this conversation and to just talk about some of the things and the ways that we feel, the way that we see people behave, the way we've noticed society teaching us about weight and body and how that impacts things. And so if anybody wants to volunteer to just sort of let everybody know why you thought this was a good conversation to be a part of, you can just jump right on in and share that. Does anybody want to go first? Pam.
Me. Okay. Sure. I think my connection's really crappy right now, so I do apologize. So perfect conversation for a 50-year-old to be having, in my opinion. It's really interesting when you hit middle age. You tend to become less visible, and in a lot of ways, it's a friggin' relief. When it comes to my body and how I'm feeling about it, and in general society, it's been an interesting journey. For somebody who is a self-proclaimed athlete and a feminist. And it's been an interesting journey the past few years and ever since the birth of my twins. And Larry, you can attest to what twins can do to your body. But I had a conversation not too long ago with a body positivity expert. She's phenomenal. Food Freedom Body Love is her IG account. She said to me, it's really easy to be body positive and have, and be proactive and an advocate for positive body image when you're privileged to have a good body. She said it becomes a lot harder when you get older, you've gained weight, maybe you've had kids, maybe you have hernias and diastases like I do, but it's been an interesting journey because as much as I considered myself to be a really strong advocate and really positive about my body, deep down I wasn't. And it's been an interesting struggle to figure out what's right for me and also how to convey self-confidence and try and remove too much thinking about the body from my kids' vernacular as they grow up and become preteens. So that's where I am.
It's a big one when we think about our kids as part of the conversation, for sure. Kristina or Pam, do either want to, or Pamela, I'm trying to distinguish between the two of you. Do either of you want to share a little bit?
I would just like to jump in and say I said yes, raised my hand, and I said yes because this is something we need to talk about. I remember starting or having my first diet attempt. I say attempt because I was never successful. When I was about 14 years old, I felt inadequate, not enough, too fat, too everything on the negative side. And I started my first diet. And I lived the rest of my life up until last year when something shifted in me. And I would love to talk about that later on. But I dieted for decades, and that really messes with your mind and it steals a lot from you. At least it did for me. So that's why I said I wanted to do this so we can talk about this openly and help other young women. Yeah.
Perfect. Kristina, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to jump in and participate in this important conversation because body image is something that we deal with at a very young age. And as you've both said, you may have started dieting at a young age because it's what you're exposed to. And today, in our society, in our culture, our beauty standards really dictate how you're supposed to look. And me having two girls, it's definitely something that I want to convey and help them create positive body image so that they don't go through the same struggles that I did growing up. I spent almost 2 decades really struggling with that. And I've been in a really good place over the last few years. And now I can comfortably be an advocate for whether it's mental health or eating disorders. Before I couldn't, even if I tried, it's just a way to hide certain issues that I had. But yeah, definitely becoming a mother and being exposed to what beauty is constantly. You can be waiting at the grocery store and seeing on covers of magazines that, while you're waiting to pay or whatever, how to lose 5 pounds in 2 weeks, or going onto Instagram and seeing everything being filtered. And it's not something that I grew up with, having social media, but it's something that today's teens are dealing with. And anyways, I could go on for so long about this topic. It's just so important. The more we talk about it, the more that people are aware. And yeah, I'm just really thankful that you asked me to come and join.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this conversation is so big because as somebody in a fatter body, there's a lot of times where I just want to hide because I've been shown my whole life, right? Even before Instagram, there were no fat people in magazines, right? And I can go on and on. I recently started watching a movie and I had to turn it off. I was like, no wonder fat people hate themselves, right? Everything about it, when there was a fat character involved, was like men being like, ooh, right? You're like, right? You internalize that. But not only that, is like, when is enough, right? When you have like size -5, I don't even know what the size is, right? When everybody thinks that they're trying to be what they see in magazines, which is photoshopped and not even real anyway, nobody ever feels like they measure up, right? Like there's no I have arrived. There's no like now I feel good if you're trying to constantly be something to fit what you think is the ideal versus, right? So there's body positivity, which is, good. There's also just body neutrality. Like, my value is not attached to what I look like. And it is ingrained in us. Even just coming on here, I was like, oh, I don't have the same like filters that like smooth out my skin on this app as I do on the other one. And like, I'm like, that's okay. But I had to talk myself through it because not looking too old, not looking too fat, not looking too this, not looking all of that. It's just in us constantly.
Well, if you take a step back, Lara, and think about the control that's being exerted on women and the amount of energy and time that we spend thinking about our body and purchasing cosmetics and trying to alter ourselves in the broader context of patriarchy, there's a lot, you can dig pretty far to realize just how much like capitalism and the patriarchy is driving a lot of this as well as the way we've been socialized, but that can arguably be because of patriarchy as well. So like, it's so heavily influenced by like everything we think about ourselves, and the amount of time and effort we spend thinking about our bodies is so that we'll buy and we'll purchase, and so that we won't feel confident. There's a deep-seated rage almost when we come to this topic, right? Yeah. And it's been a real journey over the past few years coming into, I'll call it a mental awakening of what really is going on. And I'm really fighting against it.
It's like we've been programmed and continue to be that way on social media, even in our personal interaction, that we're not good enough and we have to keep trying at getting better. But I think what changed it for me was last year. I spent some time last year with a woman who's dear to my heart. She's in her 80s. And I observed her for a couple months last year. And I saw this woman at 80, and she's dieting at 80 years old. She's not having the real butter on the bread. She's having the margarine or the fat-free, whatever it is. She has not had real butter in decades. She's watching everything she eats, eating stuff which didn't look and taste good, I'm sure. It certainly didn't look good. All because she felt that she was fat. And I look at her, and she was probably a size 10, maybe 12. But she was so unhappy with her size, and she kept complaining about her tummy. And for me, I'm like, and that was me too. I would be complaining about my body and the size, and I would also, lean more towards eating the fat, not the fat free, but the less calories and that type of thing. And then I saw her, and I'm like, do I want to be counting calories and watching that when I'm 80? And it opened up my eyes, and I'm like, no, enough, because there's no end to it. And Lara, you said something earlier on. It's like, I guess I was thinking before that aha moment that I would arrive at some point. And then I realized that you could be 80 something and never arrive. And that opened my eyes. And there's this everywhere she turns, she does hours. She's 80 something, and she would do hours in the gym. And if she doesn't do hours in the gym every day, she feels like she's failing. And she has to watch what she eats all the time. And she doesn't enjoy it. She doesn't enjoy what she eats, but she has to, because she'll probably get a little tummy, is what she says. Right? And I find, Pam, yes, it's control. It's the patriarchy. I tell you, she has had 8 decades of programming, and it's heartbreaking. Yeah. But that was me when I saw that, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I am done. And I started accepting my body in a way that I've never had, thanks to that interaction. And now I can come and talk about it, talk about my bigger body, talk about all of that. I couldn't do this before that interaction or that experience last year.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of that is disordered eating in so many different ways, right? Is that we've all been taught that almost everything we want to do is wrong and we better fix it.
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's not good enough, and keep trying. And it takes a lot to change that habit, change that desire, notice it. And then, I mean, and that's, I think, where I'm at is now at least I notice it, right? Like you talk to other people and you're not like, okay, I need to go on a diet. Like, right? Like you're like, maybe it's not about just losing weight. But I think it goes across the board. And I think, Kristina, we were quickly touching on this the other day when we were talking, like there's the entire other side of like pitting ourselves against each other, right? Like they're the people who are like, you're fat, that's terrible. They're like, oh, you're thin, you don't even understand. Or like there's all the sides of this, and it's just really upsetting.
I can say that it is definitely something that isn't encouraged to talk about. For whatever reason, like you said, we're pitted against each other. So when somebody doesn't feel good about a comment that was made about the size of their body, well, and it's kind of like, well, fix it, or do something about it. And then on the other end, there's people that are thin or skinny or whatever, and they are born that way. But then you go up to them and you tell them how thin and how you call them names, you make assumptions about their health when they are just born that way. Now they feel bad about the way that they look, and they can't change that. That's something, or okay, now I do have to change that, And so now we're going into like body dysmorphia and disordered eating and things like that, where, or telling, or for somebody who is, who just is fine, and then they pit themselves against what beauty is today and think that they have to lose a few pounds, and now they are living with an eating disorder, and you're making fun of the way that they look. Well, there's no winning. Like, at what point, what weight is good enough for you, for not you, but I mean to the person that's speaking to me? Like, what's good enough for you? We're never good enough. You're either going to be too big, you're going to be too thin, your nose isn't going to be right. You always have to change something about you when there's nothing to change about yourself. Like, it's just, we're constantly comparing, and it's not supportive, and yeah, it's a topic that just becomes so difficult to talk about because we just shut everybody down.
Well, and as a society, we are literally placing so much importance on something that, in my mind, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it's ludicrous. Like, if you take a step back and look at it, it's ludicrous, right? You talk to your kids about how the most important thing is to be themselves, to recognize their beauty as a person, to be kind, to recognize that they're humans on this earth and that all living creatures have value. And then we turn around and the entire society is against that message. And I'm working really hard to, have conversations, tough ones, with my kids who are now 11, because as I said to them, you're entering a phase in life where mommy and daddy don't influence you nearly as much as the people you're going to encounter, the friends you're going to choose, and you're going to be making, choices about how you want to spend your life and how you want to feel about yourself.
Yeah.
But like, even we were talking about the 80-year-old, grandma. Well, my mom, has made comments like, so good that your girls have tall, skinny legs. Right. Or my mom makes comments about the fact that I have my grandmother's chin and what a pity that is. I'm like, oh my God, this is so not important to my life. Right. And COVID has really sped up, I think, women's frustration or basically fed upness about it all. There's so many people I know that maybe they don't even wear bras at this point. I know I certainly don't most days, because we're over it. Like, I'm not dyeing my hair anymore. I'm rarely wearing makeup, and I've hit the open water and I swim 10K, and my body can do incredible things. And I'm learning to love just how strong and how beautiful it is, regardless of the shape, right? But that's not easy to do. There are days when I'm still like, this is not okay. I need to, make some changes. But do I? Like, I can be happy just being me. I don't know.
I think one of the things that I've been grateful for is that there's just more representation of all kinds of people that we're seeing starting to be in places. And there was once, there was a show that I saw on Netflix, and forever this was like, oh, this is why representation is important in this particular scenario, where there was, a guy and a girl, and the guy was really into the girl, and the girl was like, I guess, right? Like, okay, like, yeah, we can date, but like, it's casual, right? And by traditional standards, he was the one who was hot, and she was in a fatter body. And seeing it, not like, her weight was never discussed. It was not brought up, right? It was never part of it. It was just that he found her attractive and wanted to date her. And in the media, in movies, almost always when there is a fat character who falls in love, it's because the moral of the story is it turns out she was great anyway, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's essentially what it is. She was great even though she was fat. It's like, wait a minute. What if it's just like, it doesn't matter? And there are people who are attracted to bigger bodies. So I love that it was part of the story without it being a topic. And I think that's when we can start to just see people, until I started seeing more and more people just being in their bodies and comfortable, just like, the goal always was, yeah, you're attractive, just find flattering clothes, which means try to find clothes that make you look slimmer than you are, right? Versus now there's a lot of people who are like, no, I'm just going to wear whatever I think looks nice, and I'm going to do it, and it doesn't matter. So, number one, representation, seeing people who are actually doing that means that it feels less, right? It's like less shocking to suddenly see that. And I think that that's, the more we talk about it, the more we see it, the more we accept that, the easier it is to start believing it. Because until then, we all just think we're wrong, right? We're all trying to be something we're not. We are not measuring up, all of the things. So that was a little bit of a...
Yeah, it is changing. I agree, Lara. Like, we have seasons passes to the big water park here in town, Calypso, and the two-piece bikinis are on every shape of woman now. And I'm like, right on. Like, I'm just like, and I actually make a comment to my girls about it, right? How I'm really happy to see that people are just wearing what's comfortable now. And I've actually said to them, I'm really happy you're growing up now. It does feel like a dumpster fire, but I think it's because change is actually happening, and it's going to be really uncomfortable. But, like, there's no cliquey style. Everybody can do and wear what they want these days, like anything goes, and people are free to be who they want to be. Okay, maybe not completely, but within our spheres of reference, they are. In some societies, some cultures, in some kind of more male-dominated areas, or even just downtown during a truck convoy, maybe not, but we're getting there, right?
I do hope there's more representation, but I also think there's also more extremes from the things like social media, right? Like, Kristina, you were mentioning, there's like still like even more images, and I don't know. My teens are still young enough that I haven't really seen how it's impacting them, but I imagine it's almost like, at least now we have one voice that is like, look, there are people wearing whatever they want, but there's still a lot of those beauty messages out there, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you definitely see it today. And the messaging is also confusing because now we are moving more towards embracing what you have. And It's like, we're not saying that being thin is the way that you become beautiful. So I am seeing a lot more like swim ads and underwear ads and bras and all that type of stuff, with embracing all different shapes and sizes, whether skinny, bigger, different races, whatever it is. So you're definitely seeing that. But at the same time, when you go on social media and there's all of those filters and there's Photoshop, and we're trimming waists and making it, it's all false, but we're making it look like this is what beauty is. This is what it is to be beautiful. And that's not at all how it should be portrayed. I mean, anyways, social media for me and the diet culture are two big ones that I could go on about forever, because they're just everywhere. It's everywhere, and everybody's on social media. And to go on about the diet culture, I mean, they prey on the vulnerable. If you feel bad about yourself, then they want you as a customer not to make you a better version of yourself, the way that they will say it, but just to get your money. And like, the worse you feel about yourself, the more money they want from you. It's incredible. You can fill out a survey when you're going to purchase one of those products that they have, and you can fill out the fact that you have an eating disorder, and that should be a red flag where you shouldn't be purchasing their product. Yeah. But in the end, they'll give you some 1,200 calorie a day maximum. No, they shouldn't even be selling anything to you, but they just prey on vulnerable people. And anyways, I could go on so much about the diet culture and the businesses, but
there sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Apply your critical thinking, though, to who owns these companies, right? And this is where, like, all of the platforms that are pushing these filters and developing and sexualizing girls, and the stores that continue to create awful, like, super sexy crop tops only for the girl section and stuff. Until the companies are replacing their executive with a diversity of gender and race, we're not going to see a lot of change. But I do argue that we're at a critical point in history where change is happening.
Yeah.
And so there's a counter response to that that's really, really pushing to keep the status quo. So, you know, even when I talk to my girls about social media, I'm teaching them as much critical analysis as possible. I feel like I'm removing a lot of their innocence earlier than I'd like to, but I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah, these businesses are owned by older white males. That's what it is. And yeah, so just for people to keep that in mind, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry that is the majority of it is owned by older white men.
There's a singer who created a song called Victoria's Secret. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's been on social media a lot right now. And she wrote it in response to a girl that she babysits going to Victoria's Secret with her friends, and her friends shaming her for her, I think, potentially flat chest, something, it doesn't matter, right? Whatever it is, it was wrong. And so the song's called Victoria's Secret. And she's like, the secret is, like, who's deciding all this stuff? Some old guy who lives in Ohio, right? Like, that's who's deciding how badly we're supposed to feel about our bodies and how much money we need to spend to try to make it right. And like I just got like a whole body like ugh feeling, right? But that's really what it is. And I will try to drop the link to that so that people can see it wherever they're watching this after. But it's a good reminder, right? Like another one of the lines in her song is like, I wish somebody had told me thunder thighs are just normal human thighs, right? Like we don't need, like, whatever it is, we always think something is wrong. And people tell us constantly we're trying to fix it all the time. I think, Pamela, you were going to say something before. So
Yeah, I was. I just find a lot of times my biggest critics were other women. I remember in early 2020 when I decided I'm not going to color my hair again because I couldn't, right? I couldn't go to the hairdresser and stuff, and I decided to let my hair grow. Quite frankly, I love my grays. In fact, I call them silvers, not grays. Um, and I like it. And even the year before that, I had stopped wearing foundation and all this thing, concealers and all of that. I'm done with it. So by the time 2020 came around, not only was I not wearing makeup except lipstick, my hair was going gray. And I had friends who I would consider close friends say to me, you don't want to start looking like you're letting yourself go. And a couple times I stood up and I said, well, letting myself go, showing up as my authentic self, who I am is appearing as letting myself go. And I did that a couple times. And now I'm just like, I don't have the energy. There's so many other things. I'm running a business. I don't have time for that pettiness. But there's this perception as women, I think, that not only how we are is not good enough, or authentic self is not good enough, but in order for us to be successful and respected out there, we need to have our hair a certain way. We need to have that red lipstick and the matte finish and the, I don't know, the 4-inch heels with the red, the Louboutin, right? And there is that image. And who started that? Who the hell started that? Was it a old white man from Ohio, or was it other women like us who felt that we
probably
need
a
to compete with each
combination.
other?
Yeah. Because even like the more expensive your clothing looks, the better you look, apparently, right? Like the
yeah.
Kristina,
No, I was just going to say that society also tells you that you get rewarded for looking a certain way, right? So, and that's called having thin privilege, because you get the medical attention, or you get the attention, or you get the job, or people will help you because of the way that you look. But you get these rewards. You get you can be famous, you can model, you can go into acting or singing and use your talents and be maybe discovered. Way more chances if you are on the thinner side than anything else. So society definitely tells you that you will get rewarded for being thin.
and in some ways you really do, right? Like they don't just say that, it is true.
Yeah.
Again, I saw something recently where somebody's like, it doesn't matter, your weight has nothing to do with what you want to do, but that's not entirely true. There are limitations based on your weight, and there are things that are different. And like, I'm not like, I think it's important not to sugarcoat everything. Like, there's like, let's be real about it, but also talk about why things need to change and what it is that people have decided is valuable, right? Like not looking old. Like, why? Right? Like, the older I look, the more people tend to think that I have more knowledge, right? So, right, like the older you are, people tend to think that, right? They're like, oh, you're older, you have more knowledge, you have more experience, that's good, but you don't want to look old because then you're not beautiful. So therefore, ultimately, so first of all, that's not true. But also, it's always comes back to the number one goal is be beautiful so people want you.
So do you find that, Lara? I find that as an older woman, and somebody that doesn't fit the mold of beauty, I'm virtually invisible. Whereas men get a lot of respect in the boardrooms and in the business. But even as an artist, the attractive artists get more attention on social media and more likes and follows than talented artists, right? It's still, and my experience as well in an office environment is, you know, that I really had to assert myself to be seen. And I'm being blunt, it's true. At least in my experience.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of different pieces to that. For one, for me, I've created my own spaces so much that sometimes I don't really know what it's like to be, right? Like I haven't worked in an office in 15 years. And even when I did work in offices, they were almost always all women. Like that just tended to be what my life was like. But I also think our own confidence it impacts how visible we are, right? So over the last 10 years, I've done a lot of work on just putting myself out there and getting more comfortable, right? There was a time where I never would have gotten on camera without makeup on, like, right? I would have had to do my hair and put on makeup and then even then, like, oh, right? Like nobody's going to want to see me. It's going to be uncomfortable, blah. And the more I do it, the more I'm just like, hey, I'm here and I'm me anyway. And I'm very confidently me. I find that translates more, right? Like I think just how much we believe in ourselves translates in how we present ourselves. But I also want to acknowledge that the spaces I'm in are not necessarily the ones that everybody else is in. Like I truly understand that I simply don't put myself into certain situations. And when I was going to like even networking events, right? Like the sort of go to the Chamber of Commerce networking breakfast, right? Like nobody talked to me. I was just like an invisible person in the background. And I was like, I don't know why I came to this. But then I never tried to change that situation. I just stopped going there and I started going into other situations.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's the answer. I think we need to change it in all the places, but that's kind of been my way of doing things.
Yeah, I remember going to a conference when I was still in the government and I was working in IT, digital innovation at the time. I was actually speaking at the conference in a different session and I was at a networking hour. And I was talking about the session with another gentleman about that I had just been in. He's like, oh, I would have thought you would have been in the Women in IT session. Like, you're an asshole. Right? I was like, no, actually, this is my wheelhouse. And this was the topic I was interested in. And I'll talk to you later. And I walked away. But I'm like, you're just like, seriously. You should have been in with the other women.
Yeah. So it all comes back to the patriarchy and capitalism. Every single one of these episodes we've done so far, every single one, inherently the issue is the patriarchy and capitalism. Because it's just, I mean, it's in everything. It's true. It's just true. The way that it impacts how our lives are. I don't even know, right? It's just, it always comes back to the people in power not wanting to lose power, right? Like I said, things are changing, but there's a lot of people who are not happy about those changes. There's a bunch of us who are like, thank goodness things are changing, but there are some very angry people that things are changing, and that's causing a lot of conflict. Does anybody else have anything? I feel like if I don't watch out, I'll just be like, and blah, 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 and this and that, right? Like this is the ranting kind of feeling. So without getting into that.
It gets me angry that other people feel it is okay to judge someone in a bigger body or anybody, but I'm speaking as someone who is in a bigger body. I think it really angers me. I remember, and you're going to hear a lot of reference to friends, like friends that I have, and maybe I need new friends. But anyway, I remember being in New York and walking down the street with my friend, having a good time. And this bigger lady came out of a Starbucks with a drink, the whatever you call it. And my friend said, where is she going with that? It's not like she needs that, right? And did I say anything? No. I was embarrassed because I was about the same size as that lady, right? And I'm wondering now, what does my friend think of me? And that friend in particular has said things over the years, and I have never stood up to her. And I was saying, just, I would say over the past few months, thinking, you know what? Do I wait for the next time she says something really nasty about someone's body? Or do I say, let's have a conversation? I want to talk to you about some stuff. Right. And I haven't gotten the answer because I hate confrontation. And I really don't want to have the conversation. But I think she needs to know. She needs to know that what she's doing is it's not okay. She was telling me a story. She was on the subway, New York subway, and there was someone with very distinct body odor. And she said, I know exactly who it was. I'm like, how would you know if it's, it's a full train? She said it was this lady, and the way she described it was an overweight person. And like, how do you know it was her? Were you standing next to her? Were you like holding on and breathing under her arm? Or, no, but she just, out of everybody in the subway cab, she just knew it was the overweight person. And that's just the beginning of it. And that's just one of my friends. And I seem to hang around people who tend to make really harsh judgment about women in bigger bodies. And as I say it, I have not heard them say anything about guys in bigger bodies. So it seems to be targeted to women. And they're so comfortable doing it that I don't think they realize what they're doing. And they do it in front of me, not thinking it is something derogatory or hurtful. That's how normal it is to them.
Maybe you're being called, Pamela, to actually be that advocate. Maybe you're attracting. No, but it's, and that's actually bringing up a really good question, right? When we talk about just being happy, like almost happy to be invisible, or only choosing to be in environments that are going to be supportive to you, it's a bit of self-preservation. And it's interesting because I was in an LGBTQ sensitivity kind of course recently for Big Brothers Big Sisters, and the speaker actually asked us, are you an ally? Right. And her definition of ally for sure, related to taking action when you see something. And I was like, the vast majority of the others in the room were in their 20s, right? Maybe their early 30s. I'm like 50. And I was like, I'm not putting my hand up. And it's not because I'm not an ally, but it's because I don't want that much and I don't want to have to put myself out there constantly to try and make change happen. I'm too tired now. I just want to live my life happily. But it does beg the question, should we stop complaining? And, should we be out there like commenting every time we see it, pointing it out and making sure that people are like starting to think about their language or their behaviors? I don't know. I know I'm tired.
I am tired.
I think it's a combination of things. So one is having conversations like these, posting and sharing, different points of view, making it clear that there are different ways to think about things is one place to start, right? I think there are times when I see people saying things and I'm like, ugh. And I decide in a case-by-case situation, do I have the energy to say something? And it's probably like a 50-50 yes or no. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. A lot of the time I try to remind myself that, especially if it's social media, I'll do it in that place in a way that I know I'm not going to change the person who commented's mind, but maybe my comment will be comforting to somebody who was negatively impacted by the comment in the first place, right? So I don't think I'm changing your mind. I just want everybody else to know where I stand about this, right? That's part of it. So I think that's kind of where it's at. And just to come back to even the friends and ourselves, the internalized fat phobia, the internalized beauty standards, like what we think we need to be, is sometimes worse than anything else, right? Like, who's the hardest on us? It's usually ourselves, right? Who people in fatter bodies tend to be really hard on fat people because we've been taught to, like, because we hate, like, it's right? Like, what I see, what is that I am, right? Like, it all plays up in this really gross shame spiral. And it's fear and shame and, right, all of these other pieces. So the internalized, right, it plays out in all kinds of other things, right? And it's when people who've internalized that how important it is, or like internalized homophobia, even when you're not straight, right? Like all of these things that comes in as shame and then spews out in very negative ways towards other people and towards ourselves. So yeah, so in terms, like, all of the ways, right? Like, do we say something? Do we notice something? But I think there's so many pieces to this. How badly people feel about themselves based on everything they've learned. The fact that they've never even considered that it could be different because it's been taught to them for so long, right? You don't want to have gray hair. That's going to make you look old, and looking old is bad, right? Why? Why is that true, right? But there's some people who have never, right? Like, I've heard people say that, oh, if I let my hair go gray, this person in my life wouldn't like it. I was like,
Yeah.
why? Like, who cares? Also, there's so many pieces to it.
Yeah, I definitely think that it also brings out people's insecurities. So when you're looking at other people and bringing them down, it kind of you're trying to make yourself feel better about something that you're insecure about. So it's good to have that conversation. And I know that Pamela doesn't want to have that conversation. But it's good to have that conversation with somebody because it could be a really good discussion like we're having here. And bringing it up and making people aware that what they're saying actually hurts you, even if they're looking and targeting other people in their comments. But yeah, I've felt a lot of comments that were made towards me. I've always wondered, is it because the person is insecure in some way and they're just trying to make themselves feel better by putting me or somebody else down? And I think often that's what it is.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody here has read the 4 Agreements, but I still to this day swear it's the only self-help book that I've really loved. But it's one of the 4 agreements is don't take it personally. And it basically explains that, like, everybody's filtering everything they say, how they react, and everything is based on their sphere of reference and the way they're perceiving the world. And it's almost always about themselves. Like, everything we say and do is usually about ourselves. Like, we are self-centered. But when you recognize that, I tend not to take things nearly as personally now because I've really started to live that mantra that if somebody says something critical, there's something in their statement that has to do with their own issues. Mm-hmm. It's almost never about the actual person.
Mm-hmm. Right? Totally.
And none of us think that we measure up, right? Like, when in all the things we've been taught that we're not there yet, right? Like, we're always trying to be better, faster, more beautiful, smarter. Like, you're never measuring up, and you always are worried you're not measuring up. And, like, it just is never ending. And that's, one of the things, again, like, that's trickling through all these conversations that I am hoping people take away from hearing conversations like this is we get to be who we are, right? Like, different is good. I don't need to be like any of you. And there is no one size, one ideal to measure up to. And I recognize that that is a difficult thing to believe when we've lived a life at all, right? If you've lived in this world, it's hard to believe that's true. But the more we can just be who we are, the way we want to be, and that there are people who, like, all the ways are great. But that's not what we've been taught, right? The rules of society tell us we're wrong almost all of the time. And I find it infuriating and frustrating, and it's why I want to keep bringing up these conversations, because it's just not true. But we believe it so deeply, and we've been taught it from such a young age that we don't even notice ourselves doing it, right? We did an episode a little while back about gaslighting ourselves, right? Where you tell yourself, like, nobody else is telling you you're not good enough or something's wrong. Like, you're just diminishing your own truth all the time. And it just comes from this place where you don't even notice you're doing it.
Yeah. You know how I know I've come a long way? I recently went and booked and prepaid my deposit for plastic surgery. Okay. And that would be, in the past, something that I, A, as a feminist, would never have considered. Mm-hmm. And B, would be a bit ashamed to talk about, because the assumption is that I'm trying to change my body to look a certain way. Mm-hmm. But in my 50th year, I realized what I really want is to fix the diastases and the hernia that I have in my stomach, and to be able to fit into bathing suits that I need for my 10K swims. And I want to be able to live and play competitive volleyball for another decade or more. And so I'm giving that to myself, because our health system does not support fixing these things that cause us to be able to do less. And so I'm just doing it. And it's going to cost me $25,000. And I'm not ashamed of it. Like, I'm quite excited to be able to fix something that for a decade has been affecting my ability to do what I want to do. And it's going to result in a flatter tummy, but, you know, whatever.
Nice.
Yeah, but it's not easy, right? Because there's still a lot of emotions tied to that, right? Mm-hmm. And even talking to some people, they're going to make assumptions about my motivation, right? Mm-hmm. So,
well, good on you for doing that for yourself, and whatever reason it was, I'd say do it for you. But thank you for sharing. That is really, I admire that. So cool.
Well, it's not easy, right? And can I just say, I'm loving Barb DeFazio's like commentary on our side, by the way. She's been making all sorts of awesome comments. Yeah. And she's in the No Bra Club too. So, you know, good on you, babe.
And the shame, I think, is huge, right? Like, not talking about all of this stuff because of shame, whether it's that we think, like, all the parts of it, right? The shame we have from thinking that other people are judging us. They're judging us for being too thin, too fat, too old, too frumpy, right? Like, all the things. It's just heavy.
Yeah. Well, even as it relates to this surgery I'm having, like, part of the motivation is actually to be able to find a bathing suit that friggin' fits me. That's ridiculous. Like, it's ridiculous that the patriarchy, the people that own these companies, aren't making sizes that will allow women to be active. It's crazy. I wasn't able to find a wetsuit that fit me for my swims, like, into the fall and in the spring. It's impossible. So, I mean, that's crazy that I have to have surgery or go on major diets just to find something that I can wear, or have somebody actually make them for me and pay through the nose for it, right?
Right, because we've been told a bigger body means that you don't like to move, that you don't like to exercise, that you don't want to do any of those things, which is entirely untrue. There are all kinds of people who are in bigger, fatter bodies who love to do that, and there are people in tiny bodies who do not.
Yep.
All the people want to do like there's sizes and ways of being in all across the spectrum. There are people who are healthy, who are in bigger bodies. There are people who are unhealthy, who are in smaller bodies. But we've just decided what everything is, and it's just not true.
Yeah.
It's just not true.
And meanwhile, my girls are shopping in the boys section or getting secondhand clothes.
Love it.
Because they can't find anything in the girls or the women's section that's appropriate for them to wear. Right?
And having more gender neutral clothing is great too. And yeah, crop tops are in right now, so you're seeing a lot of those. I'm glad though that it's not that a lot of people feel comfortable wearing them in different bodies, but it's just, yeah, it is a difficult thing because it reaches into so many areas, right? Because we get into slut shaming, which is another conversation we don't have time for, right? Right? Like what is the meaning we put on different clothing, on different body types, all of these things? It's just never ending. And Kristina, your kids are littler, right? So you haven't come into puberty. Pam, your twins aren't quite teens. I've got all teens now, right? And just watching how things change, and it's just interesting. And I'm trying to set good examples.
Yeah. I feel a little bit like I'm walking on eggshells because I don't know what's the right thing to say, what's the right thing to do anymore. So I don't know. I clearly have a darker history with all of that stuff. So I really just want to help shape them to be who they are. Has nothing to do with their size or being beautiful. They are beautiful, and I tell them all the time, but I'm on eggshells. Can I be saying that? Should I be saying that? I never know what the right thing to do or say is anymore, just because I'm just so scared about the effects of all of it, But yeah. And something that was really eye-opening for me is when I was in treatment, and this was maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, whatever. I got to meet people of all shapes and sizes. I thought that having an eating disorder meant that you were very thin, and it does have something to do with that. There are bigger people and that have or had eating disorders. It comes in all shapes and sizes, and I did not realize that. So we have to be really careful as to those comments that we're making. We have to be more sensible about these topics, because you don't know that person may actually be living with mental illness, and it's difficult. It's hard. I definitely have a lot of compassion, and I feel a lot for this topic, just because of that. But yeah, definitely it was really eye-opening to see that it affects everybody. It's not just all the thin people that that have the eating disorders. No, everybody. Men have eating disorders. It was shocking, because I was like, what are they doing here? But no, hey, they also have body image. It starts with body image. It has control. It has a whole, that's another topic that we can for another hour. But it's bigger than just one category of people.
Absolutely. How we see ourselves, that whole, you look back at photos of when you were younger, and that you hated how you looked in that photo, and now you're like, I looked great, right? The judgment we put on ourselves in all kinds of bodies, and it doesn't matter, right? I think everybody has been trained to be critical of themselves, and so I am hoping that by having conversations like this, that by talking about it, that by sharing our experiences, by talking about things that other people used to never talk about because it's shameful or it's like a secret thing, you don't talk about that. Like by having these conversations, that people will start to see different ways, that people will realize it doesn't always have to be the way we thought they were, or the way people talked about it. Because there are a lot of things in the last 10 years that I used to think, and I didn't understand how it could be any different. And now I know they are, right? Like it just takes having conversations around it and being willing to listen and being willing to change your mind to start seeing change. But if you think you're right, then nothing's going to change. So my greatest
wish really quickly is that younger and younger generations see themselves more realistically and love themselves sooner over time. Mm-hmm. It took a while for us to get there.
Too long. And so that's why I really hope that we can keep having conversations like this. I appreciate so much that you all took the time to join me. For everybody who's watching, I've put links to everybody's websites in case you want to go and follow them, check out what they're doing. But I really appreciate your time and the conversation we had today.
Thank you for having me, Lara. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.